All right, so today I'm going to be talking about building out your own digital asset management tool within Drupal. So how to use all these wonderful Drupal modules together to make something truly cool for managing digital assets. In this case, the example I'm going to be using is photography, sort of high quality, high file size images, but you could expand this to any asset that you may have, whether it be files or video. So this is me. My name is Eric Simbrat. By day, I'm a web manager for the College of Engineering at Georgia Tech. And by night, I am a PhD student in instructional technology at Georgia State University. If you want to learn more about me, you can check out my website. And if you want to ask me a question or get in contact with me after this presentation, you can follow me on Twitter and talk to me about whatever you feel like. I'm happy to answer questions. So I'm going to start with media management, which is, of course, the biggest part of a digital asset management system. And as you guys know, the state of media management in Drupal 7 is not ideal for a lot of uses. When you compare it to Web 2.0 applications, you know, if you compare it to how Facebook uploads photos, or even how, I hate to do this, how it compares to WordPress, uploading images, managing those files, and Drupal just feels old. And more importantly, it's also fairly difficult, especially for people that are used to things like this, where you drag files into there and the content management system, i.e. WordPress, handles everything else there. So that's the first thing, is Drupal is a little behind. And of course, there are some solutions in place to attempt to bridge this divide, Media and Scald being two of the big ones. The problem is that it doesn't really work in a particular situation where you're wanting to manage images or digital assets that fall outside of the scope of what media does really well. If you're wanting to upload, for example, CR2 files, which are Adobe RAW files, which are 50, 70 megs a piece, media is not going to handle that very well. If it does, it's probably going to cry as soon as you upload that there. So when thinking about that, if you're uploading these raw giant images, you're going to have to build this yourself given tools that Drupal has in place. So of course our goal today is to propose a series of modules and settings to construct your own digital asset management system. And this should hopefully give you a very good idea from a Drupal backend perspective on what modules are being used to make this a heck of a lot easier for you. So to look forward to actually creating this, we need to look why and how we arrived at this spot to where we have to do this. And so WordPress doesn't work just because WordPress doesn't have a modular plugin design. Pretty much if you install a plugin on WordPress, it's used for one and one only thing. If you try to adjust that there, you're going to have to know a lot of PHP to do it. And I don't know about you guys, but I hate doing anything in PHP, which is why I use Drupal. And of course, the one-size-fits-all approach, which I was just saying, anything outside of what the WordPress developer expects just doesn't work. So we can just get rid of WordPress right now. And why Drupal doesn't work, from core at least, is that, obviously, like I was saying, the user experience just is awful for uploading selection of files. And although media goes a little step further towards that, not really. And then, of course, the big thing that really bothers me about Drupal 7 is that file metadata is not exposed when you're uploading images, for example. Even if you define custom fields for an image in Drupal, it's just not going to show it there when you upload a new photo. And for a developer, that drives me crazy, and for my end users, it really bothers them that they don't have the flexibility there. And of course, the default image handler in Drupal has limited scope. So anything outside of your traditional JPEGs, GIFs, PNGs, and God forbid, BMPs, it's not going to work. And that really stinks if you're looking at these giant files that you want to have so that when you open up Photoshop, you're not dealing with a grainy JPEG file, because that would drive any of my graphic designers crazy. So the solution here is to use Drupal's extensive field and modular design to build a digital asset management system that has metadata-rich content associated with those images. Because for this project, that was the most important thing, is taking all this information that was hidden somewhere and attaching it to that image so that it's no longer stuck in a Word document, stuck in an email, and stuck in someone's head. That's the scariest part. So looking at things that we've already worked with in Drupal since Drupal 7 and before, fields taking on metadata, structure like content types and entities, things that we've already got a lot of experience working with. If you've touched Drupal and done any kind of structure development there, you already know this stuff. And it's just applying it in a different way than what you've been doing previously. And of course, using the dynamic entity display suite to manage, resize, and sort your assets using the things like views. And if you use Drupal, you're obviously already very familiar with views. And of course, to easy access to adjust and disable features, fields, and functionality. So I'm going to start by going through a list of modules that I used when I was developing a digital asset management suite for the College of Sciences at Georgia Tech. So here is I don't know why that last one doesn't have a bullet. That really bothers me. I'm going to go through these modules and these sub-modules off of this to give you a good idea of which ones work the best for doing a digital asset management system. So I'll go into these all in detail, so don't worry if you don't get all of these down right now, but we're going to be covering a couple different areas. Imagemagick is, of course, the magic that processes and resizes and converts the images. File entity is actually making those files and images actually fieldable and usable within Drupal. Multi-upload gives everyone what they want, which is the ability to upload more than one file at a time, because that will drive anyone insane. Prepopulation allows you to basically fill in a field as soon as you go to it, instead of relying on the user to do so, because I tend to steer away from asking my users to do as much as they can. And then rules and views, just basic stuff to how to do the fancy hide some of the complexity from your end users. So I'm going to start with Imagemagick. And this is probably the most technical part of this. So Imagemagick, with its creepy logo over here, is a image processing toolkit. It is really creepy. And he uses it everywhere. It rubs me the wrong way. So it's an image processing toolkit that runs on your server. So it runs alongside all the other stuff that your web server does. And it is a pro at doing image conversion. It replaces Drupal's default GD2, which has some, as I was mentioning earlier, some limitations. So Imagemagick rules for a couple different reasons. As it states on their website, they are compatible with over 100 image formats. So that weird, quirky image format your camera shoots out whenever it creates a file, Imagemagick can read that, convert it, and love it. It can transcode those images from a giant 50 meg file to a very, very small JPEG without much trouble. You can, if you're really feeling gutsy, add shapes and text images if you want to watermark or go crazy with it fairly easily. Imagemagick also allows you to work with really, really big images. I've never had a terapixel image, but the fact that it has it, if I ever have a need for that, I know that Imagemagick works with that and doesn't seem to choke on that. And it also allows for advanced image transforming if you want to resize it or scale it or do some weird sort of adjustments to your images. I don't know what that would take. I don't know a real world example for that, but they say they can do that. So the basic usage of this is basically the server-side tool, so you install that on your server, and then they have a module that you install, and that gives you the basic implementation. That allows you to go to your settings and say, I want to use Imagemagick instead of GD2. And that gives you pretty much a basic implementation of running Imagemagick, which will essentially resize images just like you do with GD2. So you go to image styles, you set up your image style, resize it to a certain height, width, scale it, all that good stuff. But to do the more advanced things like converting, you will need the Imagemagick raw effect. And that allows you to basically take all the syntax that Imagemagick provides and pass that straight to Imagemagick from Drupal and run that on demand whenever Drupal handles that image. So in this case, depending on how the Wi-Fi works, I may try and show an example. But on the raw effect, for example, what I do is I will take a CR2 or a TIFF file, which is a very lossless large file, and then say convert that to a JPEG, resize it to something that's not hideously large, and then deploy it to the user. And all I have to do is write a command with that, given what the Imagemagick API says, and then just basically toss that into a field on the image style settings and click save. And then when you apply that image style, Imagemagick will do all its hard work. Imagemagick Advanced is another module, and it's actually built into the Drupal integration, so you don't need to go to another project to download it. That allows you a little bit more work. It sort of gives you a starting point for working with some of the common Imagemagick tools. However, for the more advanced stuff, Raw Effect really seems to give you the amount of flexibility to go wild with your images.
So when you say Drupal integration, is that a module that you just go download?
So all that module does is it searches for Imagemagick on your server, and then it provides some tie-ins to Drupal system to say, whenever you're touching an image, use this Imagemagick module, which is installed on your server outside of Drupal at this location. And then it provides those basic integrations so that when Drupal sees an image, it knows exactly what to do with it.
Okay, so if we're using in the cloud like Pantheon, ignore Imagemagick.
Well, I don't know how much control you have over those cloud services if you are allowed to install additional modules on there on your server. I do not know, though. So that would be something you would probably have to check with them and see what their capabilities are on their server if you're able to install that stuff. And so like I was mentioning earlier, Imagemagick is really great in that lossless photo formats are a breeze for it, fairly quick. I like the fact that within a couple of seconds I'm able to take a 50 meg TIFF file and get it into something that's not hideous to work with. It's got server-side support and super fast image conversion, which really works great when you're wanting to take those really good images and use them in a number of different ways. So the second one, and I think the most equally important one, is file entity. And so what is file entity? This basically takes the file entities that exist in Drupal and actually allows you to use them the way that you should have been able to use them in Drupal 7. So rather than hiding a bit of that complexity in Drupal where it pretty much just ignores all your image fields on a file entity when you upload an image, it gives you this type. So what it'll do is it'll give you the file types that are fieldable, whether it be an image, a file, audio, video, or a document. You can also create custom file types if there's a particular format that you really want to go with that's specific to your workflow, your projects, or your conventions. And then, of course, it gives you the ability to then field those file display modes to whatever you want if you want different ways of showing how those files are rendered. And so the basic usage, there's a file entity module on Drupal. That will give you a great starting point for going with it. However, that being said, that doesn't give you a whole lot in terms of the user experience when you're uploading a bunch of new images. The big thing is under advanced usage, file entity inline is a major one. And that one actually takes all those custom fields that you do for the file and puts it in that node edit form. So that when you edit your node and there's a bunch of images on there, you can actually see the custom fields that you set up for there. So in an example I'll show you later, I've got a content type with images where each image has a bunch of radio buttons for, does it have a release for this? Does it have a model release? Does it have a photo release? And all those aren't being shown up by default with just file entity. But inline allows you to do that. When you edit it, you see all that magic. So file entity preview allows you to basically preview that file, render it inline when you're editing the node. So by default, file entity will not try and render, for example, a lossless image in there without that. And of course, file entity preview multiple, as you might expect, will actually go through and do that for multiple ones. File mime allows you to change your mime types on your server to see what the server thinks of as an image, what the server thinks of as a video and document, all that good stuff. So if your server's freaking out that something isn't being recognized as an image and you want it to be for Drupal's sake, you can do it through there. And then of course, finally, if you love revisions and you don't trust your end users to not delete things, you've got revisions to where you can set up things to track those files that are being uploaded, edited, and revised on a regular basis. And so this is a great example of inline. So this is how the editing of an image looks on the digital asset management system I created. So you've got the preview over there, which is what the preview module is doing. It's basically taking that giant TIFF file, rendering it to be super small, and then tossing it there. Because by default, it's just going to show this right here as your preview, which doesn't do a lot of good when your editor needs to see what the image actually has to write all this stuff on there. Because if I said just see this file name, if I'm going to be, I have to have a copy of that somewhere to take a look at what that actually means. So file entity inline adds in whatever fields you have. So in this case, I've got, your typical tagging field, your description, and a bunch of, I think those are just Boolean values, yes or no. And all of those show up there. And then of course, with the theme, I can apply some CSS to make it not look as hideous as it does by default, which is what I've tried to do here to clean it up for the users who are going in here and adjusting it and adding tags and editing the metadata. So this is a lot more usable, extendable, and easy to follow compared to what Drupal does out of the box. And so the next one is multi-upload, and I think this is something that for those who actually like to use lots and lots of images and upload them, one at a time just doesn't cut it, especially when you're uploading lots of big files and having to do the metadata on that. I'd much rather do it one time than have to edit that node over and over again to do it. So multi-upload, of course, is unfortunately limited by what your server and PHP file limits are. So if you are going to mess with this, I would sort of suggest that you be familiar or comfortable with editing your server settings or your PHP settings to override those defaults. Because, for example, the servers that we have at Georgia Tech, our defaults for PHP, I believe, are 32 megs per file. So that if I take that 50 meg TIFF file, the server is going to freak out and say, you can't upload this, it's way too big. And so if I upload 5 of those at one time, if that's 50 times 5, that server is just going to say, no, don't even think about it. It's not going to happen. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind. But beyond that, all this really does is turn that file field that you know and love in Drupal into something that handles multiple uploads with ease. So of course, in Drupal's infinite wisdom, the top one is your file field. That works for anything that is not an image. For images, there is a separate module, which is the multi-upload image field widget, which depends on file field widget. So if you want to work with images and allow people to upload multiple images at a time, they can do that. They just need both of these modules. And the reason why image field is a submodule and depends on that is images in Drupal have a unique display compared to all other files. If you've ever played with them, you've noticed that images are given a lot more flexibility in terms of how they can be displayed and shown in Drupal versus something like a Word document. And so Prepopulate's the next one, and Prepopulate's pretty straightforward, but I just want to touch on it a little bit. It allows you to prepopulate any URL, in this case node add. I use this for when I create a new node of a certain content type to append it with a particular string that will then prepopulate that field on that page with content. So in this case, if I want to give my end users a default value on there, but have it be determined, let's say, on views or something, I can code views to essentially go and say, when they go to this page from views, make sure that the title of the node add page has le title as the default string. And so there's lots of uses here. It really depends on what you want to do with this, but I use this heavily for defaulting whether what the default values are based on how people are getting to those pages. But this really depends on what you guys want to do with your workflow. And you can find this on the Prepopulate Drupal project. It's pretty straightforward and a pretty small module, but I find it useful in some edge situations. And so rules is one of the big ones that I think most people have had experience with, but rules allows you to do some really awesome things on events like creating a node that hides that complexity there. So that when you create a node that is a photo album, if you would rather them go to a panel or a view rather than that node display, this gives you an easy way of doing it. And so rules just basically gives you these component sets of actions and allows you to string those together into some sort of workflow for what happens when something's done on your website. So the basic usage, there's a rules module in Drupal 7 that gives you the basic functionality to do pretty much a lot of basic stuff with nodes and with what happens when a user signs in, all that good stuff. There's some extra ones for if you're wanting to take a look at stuff. So conditional rules allows you to apply a bit more logic in constructing your rules. I find that great for and or. So if I'm wanting to do some really crazy rule structuring where I'm checking a bunch of different things before I execute some actions, that's a great way of doing it. Rules bonus allows you a couple extra, There's a giant list on their project page on what the bonus actually does, but it essentially extends rules to a couple more areas than what traditionally rules does. And I'd have to bring up the project page, but I know they sort of expand on the scope of rules a little bit more. And rules link just allows you to link rules together. And of course, the last one's views, our baby. So views, everyone knows it, loves it, hopefully. If so, you're in the wrong business. You can create pages. I don't need to tell you guys this. You guys know this. Views, of course, you're going to have that already installed if you're doing anything on Drupal. But beyond that, there are some advanced usages that I found. Views field view being my favorite. It allows me to essentially have a field within a view that then can call another view and pass it context based on whatever that node or something is. I know it's ugly. I'm so sorry. It's so ugly. But there are certain situations where I want to just string views together to do some really ugly, nasty thing. But the client wants it. If the client wants it, the client's going to get it. So I have to bite the bullet and let them have that. So that allows you to string views together if you're wanting to pass in arguments based on a node or an aspect of a node to another view that does something outside of what you can do normally in views. And then, of course, panels, another thing where people love it or people hate it. It allows you to take a string of views or a bunch of views and have them on one page that takes in an argument to that panel that then passes all those arguments in certain ways to each view depending on what you set up. And so I love panels. I've been using panels for years. So when I built my digital asset management system, I said, oh, of course I'm going to use panels. It's what I know, and it works great for me, and it's easy to use. And I'll show you an example of how that's being used in a minute or so. And more. Ta-da! So there's even more. And I'm as happy as that guy is. So if you're wanting to look at some things, if you're looking at maybe linking together some entities or some nodes together, you have the ability to download those node reference, entity reference, taxonomy reference, if you're wanting to string those things together. I didn't have a use case for that, so I couldn't really build out an example to do that. And another example, of course, is 5-star. If you want your users that are populating your digital asset management to go in and actually, give a review for each of those and make it as easy as possible, where they just click whether they like that image or not, 5-star is a great way of going around that. And so the solution that the College of Sciences did, this is a very high-level view, but I'll go into that. I've got another slide that we can touch for a minute. So the digital asset management system that the College of Sciences uses, pretty much this is a view that just takes the list of photo albums, which are content types, and I'm basically showing the title, the short description, the tags that are stuck on the specific photo album, the first image within the photo gallery, which there's where that views field view is coming into place, that ugly, ugly thing. What it's doing is it's saying, for this photo album, take the first photo in that list and grab the thumbnail and show it that way. And then, of course, these are just everything that's in the header, and then you've got some, what are those things called? Contextual filters. No, that's not right. Expose filters. Thank you. That's it. Expose filters over there to drill down to what you're looking for. And so a photo album looks like this. Again, it's just a straight old view, very simple. You've got a list of photos, just have the title, images that are being linked. Now, I have to note this. In Drupal 7, with, I don't know if it's Imagemagick or what, but I'll have to look at this. I got some documentation on this. But by default, when you're editing an image this way, you can't, maybe it's, so when you have a file that's being rendered as an image, you cannot create a link to it because Drupal is overriding any link that you're putting in your view rewrite field. If you're making that an image, Drupal will overwrite that. So there's a patch in place to do that. I don't know if that's been fixed in the last 1.5 years, but it was there 1.5 years ago, and it was a giant chore. But this is just a basic view. And then this is where the magic happens, where panels is coming into play. What panels is doing is it's taking the image, it's taking all the metadata attached to the image, and then it's going through the album that's referenced by the image and grabbing all of the pictures in the album in the same order that it's being displayed so that you can easily go between images to image. So the two over here, these are the same panels, just with one major difference. This one is an image that is taken from a photo album directly, whereas this one is a photo that is taken from what I call an automaton album. And what that is this is a special kind of album that the client was wanting, where they wanted to have a custom robotic album that basically takes a tag. In this case, the tag would be like faculty. The tag isn't showing up there. Weird. Anyways, it was taking in a tag and showing all the photos across the website that are tagged with this particular tag. And that's because they wanted basically one photo to live in a bunch of different albums, and I told them do not re-upload those 5 times. Because what they're going to do is they're going to upload it in 5 different ways with 5 different tags, 5 different pieces of metadata, and no one's going to ever know where the original one is because no one's going to look at all that. So I told them, instead of doing it 5 different times, I will give you the ability to reuse that content using the same source by creating these almost like robotic fake albums that will look exactly the same and function exactly the same, with the difference that the content's all coming from the same location, which will save you a lot of headache, I promise. So what I'm going to do is, I've hopefully tried earlier to set up some pages on here that show the administrative side to it. So I don't really trust the Wi-Fi, so I'm not going to try to reconnect if it does not work. But so yeah, as I was showing the image albums, pretty straightforward. The photo albums, like I was showing, pretty straightforward. And the images, just like I was saying, it allows you to click between them. The magic happens here when you're editing the actual album itself. So in this case, this is how the editing experience looks. So it allows you to pretty much go here, edit the metadata here, add different tags, gives you previews for these TIFF files, and then for your regular image files, if this album had any, it would show up here just the same. And so this is pretty straightforward. Just pretty much once you have those options enabled, your content add page or edit page will start to look a lot more like this. Of course, I cleaned it up a little bit because this was a table in a table, or a, what is it called, field group in a field group, and it was just hideous. And then so the content type for this is pretty straightforward. So for the TIFF files, because TIFFs are shown as a file in this installation of Drupal, rather than using multi-upload and letting that handle the file field entity multiple image, so TIFFs were unique that they had to use file entity preview, and then I had to define what those file entities did when they were showing up as a preview on the node edit. For JPEGs and PNGs, this was a lot easier. I imagine if I spent enough time working with this, I could get TIFFs to function the same way that PNGs, CR2s, and JPEGs did. But given this project, it had a extremely tight time frame where that wasn't possible. And then, of course, an automaton album is pretty straightforward. All this is doing is saying, given a tag, go through and basically grab all of it. So I can, there's not a whole lot to it, but it handles the same way where it takes these tags, runs through each of the files throughout the site, and grabs the ones that fit that criteria and then show them in the same way that it's showing all the other things. So let me see if there's anything else that is important here. And so all of those pretty much are the same. One module that I think is really important is Taxonomy Display. What that allows you to do is to rewrite what happens where you go when you click on a taxonomy term as a link. By default, that page is not going to give you a lot of helpful information on what content has been tagged with that taxonomy term. And Drupal does not like the fact that you're trying to overwrite that. So the Taxonomy Display module will actually give you the ability to overwrite that and do something more intelligent with that. So I really wish I had an example of that. No, I remember why. So I haven't touched this website in 8 months, hence the security updates. And apparently the last person who touched this website ran updates and broke the tagging feature. I don't know how, I don't know why, but ideally, if I was still in charge of this website, the taxonomy display would show a quick list of, take the taxonomy term, in this case the tag, and show an image preview to it that would link then to its image page, its album page, and any automaton albums that would show up. And that's all pretty straightforward because the content already knows where all of that's being connected to. It just got to link to it appropriately, which that giant view that the taxonomy display is pointing to then will handle all that. I think that's it for that one, yeah. So another point, if you want to play around with this, I've actually gone ahead and tried to featureize this as best as I could. And of course, you're welcome to play with this and pass it on. Of course, this requires someone that knows Drupal and knows how features works because, as you might expect, this is not exactly something for a novice Drupal user to use, just because handling images like this may require a little bit of tinkering and testing. But you can download this on GitHub. It's on github.com/my name, Eric Scott Simbrat. I can't remember what, you know what, let's play a little game called Can I Access the Internet? Oh, look at that, someone loves me. Okay, so if you go to repositories, this one should be pretty easy to find. It's called feature_digital asset management. What I'm probably going to do is, in addition to this, actually dump the entire website, except for the content that's on there, put in the little dummy content and upload that as well, so that if you're, I don't have much faith in features being able to reproduce everything 100%. So what I'd rather do is give you guys an easy stop where you guys can go in, download that, load that up on a web server, and have something that, fingers crossed, works, except for you have to install Imagemagick on your server. And other than that, you have everything that's ready to go based on what I built. So I will go ahead and upload that sometime in the near future. It won't be this weekend, I promise you. But it will be in addition to this. So this gives you a feature that may get you 80% of the way, and I will give you a feature that will give you 95% of the way. That makes it a lot easier for you. And so without further ado, I think that's it for me. I don't have much else to talk about. So if you want to talk more about this and maybe you're thinking about something later where you have a question or a concern, or once you install the feature, if something's just not working out and you're confused on how the heck this thing is working, feel free to contact me. So my email address is just my first name, last name at coe.gate.edu. Or, and if you feel more comfortable doing this way, just find me on Twitter. I'm happy to answer questions there. But I really want to get you guys, if you guys have a use for this, doing so, because coming from a college where we had a budget of 0 to do a digital asset management system, this was a great opportunity to, 1, learn some of the crazy things in Drupal, and 2, to have a system that we can then scale to what we want and maintain it for virtually nothing, which was fantastic, because the other open source solutions for digital asset management are awful. Yes, they're completely awful. We tried resource space, if you've ever seen that, and no one had any idea how that worked. And the workflow for that just confused every student assistant that we had. And when we had like students from all majors being confused on how to upload images and make them public, that's what scared me and sort of made me want to do this. So I'm pretty good. I've got another 18 minutes or so. So if you guys have any questions, yeah, we'll get started with that.
So there are products out there like Flickr. You were just, what are the additional features that this has compared to, say, using those kinds of large scale?
Sure. So Flickr has the advantage that you use 0 disk space for it, because that's all on Flickr servers. The downside of that would be if you're using something like single sign-on. In this case, since I'm in a university setting, I want everyone who logs into this website to be from Georgia Tech and be given access by myself to do so using Georgia Tech accounts. Security is a major one for us, because I don't want everyone at Georgia Tech logging in here and taking these images and then butchering them for their own websites. We'd much rather handle these ourselves and hand them out as needed, and access to people that need them, not necessarily all the campus. Secondly, this allowed us to pretty much do a custom rollout with Flickr. You're just uploading the files there, and I can't actually recall how Flickr handles lossless file formats like CR2s or TIFFs. I don't know if it allows you to download those files.
So that would be a custom rollout, would be different sizes?
Different sizes, and of course different types. Different types as well.
And different fields.
And different fields as well. And you can do all of that with Drupal's entities. And part of the problem we had here is we had 2 use cases for these images. One was me as a web developer. I wanted JPEG versions, but I didn't want to have to load up a shared hard drive and go through that shared drive and let Preview on Mac generate thumbnails for all 200 TIFF files that are in that directory, because it would take about 15-20 minutes to do that, and I'm not willing to sit around and let that do that in the background. I'd much rather let the server handle it so I can easily find those. And 2, for our graphic designer, I wanted her to have access to these TIFF files where she can easily find them based on tags, descriptions, or even just going through albums and being able to easily find them and use them for whatever Photoshop projects she's working on.
What is your process from the start of the image being taken?
So because this is a very small...
Like cameras? Or...
Absolutely. So this is a department of 10 people total, 3 of which know how to use computers. So because of that, the students that take these pictures, bring them to the graphic artist, who is not computer savvy at all. Outside of Photoshop, she's illiterate. So that was one of my goals for this, is to make it dummy proof. And so she would go through, curate, pick out all the ones that don't work properly. So, you know, if she's taking 200 photos of one thing, I want her to find the 1 or 2 photos that actually work. And then upload those all at one time, tag them at one time, save them, and let Drupal handle the rest. Let Drupal handle the conversions, the sorting, the organizational structure, and then placing it in it so that it can work with other images that have the same attributes there. And so that was the reason why we went with that, because the other open source systems like Resource Space really didn't have that flexibility. Yes, they had cast login, but they also didn't allow for custom fields. The custom fields, if they had it, was extremely limited by number and by feature. And at the end of the day, we just couldn't find something that worked out. So we thought, we're a Drupal camp, why don't we just go ahead and add Drupal already in? Yes, you have a question?
A couple of them.
Sure.
Are you using watermarking? You said it had the capability, but you're not using it.
I'm not using it currently, but yes, there is the capability there. I don't know the best way of going about that. I don't know if Imagemagick is the best way to handle that, or if you're going to use Drupal's image capabilities to add that in there using a separate module. I don't know what would be the best way of going about that. I wish I had a little bit of experience with that so I could answer that better. But I know with Drupal, as you might expect, there's a couple of different ways of going about them, each of them with benefits. If you're looking for something more robust or more technical, I think that Imagemagick would allow you to do that. But Imagemagick is a fairly technical thing, beast to work with, so that may require a bit more hands-on and a bit more testing, more so than the other solutions.
One of my biggest pet peeves, and our graphic people do this all the time, is using flat images as JPEGs,
Sure.
Creating JPEGs for them, which, you know, they're modeled by the time they get displayed. And is there any control over that, or is it all user education as to whether you should get a JPEG or a GIF? And I'm just trying to tell everybody, get a painting. It doesn't matter.
Sure. So in this case, since you have ultimate flexibility over how those images are converted, you could create multiple image styles that are linked to from that view that say, if you click on this button, get PNG, it gives you a PNG. If you click this button, get a GIF, it gives you a GIF file. If it gives you a JPEG, do that. So you have a lot of flexibility there. With this, all I wanted was to get the lowest file size image so that the director of communications could go in there, take a file, and upload it on a page without him having to come to me and say, Eric, how do I do this every single time he does it? Because that's taking away my time, and in such a small department such as that really took up a good bit of my day beforehand. So that's my suggestion, is this is Drupal, and since it does give you that flexibility, you could easily code that in just with basically copying that image style and replacing your conversion from, you know, your lossless file to JPEG, to PNG, all that good stuff.
But what do we do with the $20,000-$30,000?
Jet skis. I was thinking like a pool of money you could swim through, but yeah, that's my preference. Instead of dollars, just like pennies, but it'll still feel good. I'll still enjoy it. Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
Did you expose any EXIF headers when the files are uploaded?
So that was something that I wanted to do, but we didn't have much of a need for it then. I know that Drupal there is a module that allows you to go through that file and grab the EXIF data and put it into specific fields on Drupal. I don't have much experience with that because they had no use for that, so I never touched it beyond finding the module and saying, that would be awesome, do you guys want to use this? No. So that really broke my heart. If I was still working on this, the answer would be yes, I'd be touching that and having a lot of fun with it, but for this project, no. But I know it's out there. I just don't have enough experience with it to give you a good answer on what you can do with it. Any other questions? Yes?
Have you ever had to tie this into like an LMS using more file structure for courses?
No.
But it sounds like you could do something similar as far as referencing and tying your...
Exactly, because you already have, you know, a complete control over where these files are being stored once you convert them, where they exist on the system as raw files. So you basically would have the ability to do so. I don't know specifically off the top of my head how you would structure that, but it's certainly possible. Okay, we got about 10 minutes. Anyone else have any questions? Otherwise, you guys are out early to go grab sodas or let my throat rest a little bit. Yeah, exactly. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks. Yes, in the back. No, please.
I was just going to ask, did you manage to come up with a way of doing the multi-file upload such that a group of images that were being uploaded simultaneously from the same folder could have similar set of tags pre-populated automatically?
So, yes, there is a way within the file entity to set up a token for the default value. Are you looking like to grab the elements from the EXIF data or something?
Maybe the EXIF data.
Okay.
I think more likely to be, if you're uploading them all from a folder that's called convocation, you want to have every single image tagged with convocation automatically.
Sure. I haven't personally had experience with that. The extent to which we pre-populated data there was specifically on, there was an issue. So in Drupal, file entities, the date that they're published, are all set to the date that the most recent image has been added to that. So if you add 25 images to that file field in September, and then add 5 more in October, all those files are going to show the publication date as October, and that is a pain in the butt. So what I had to do there is whenever that was happening, whenever a file is uploaded, the date field, which is a piece of metadata on that image, is pre-populated with the date of when it was uploaded, which allowed me to go around that without having to hack any of the modules to do what should be a very logical and sensible approach to how images and files should have their dates associated with them. I couldn't tell you why that happened, but it did. So yes, it's possible. I don't know about that simply because I don't know that Drupal would know what file it's coming from, simply because I would think that the file server only knows the list of files that are being passed to it and not its directory structure on your local file system.
It's true, yeah. We wouldn't know in that case, but even or the other case where you wanted to do those, 100 files being uploaded, but then let the users give them the opportunity to fill out, these were all uploaded on this particular date, and they all should have this particular tag.
I can't think of an easy solution to that right now. I'm sure there may be a solution somewhere to do that.
We're doing that on our site when you create selections. The person fills out all the form fields, then uploads all 150 files, and they all get the same data.
Okay.
I don't want them to do that, because they should have unique titles. But
Title is not one.
We don't live in a perfect world, yeah. And how'd you do that? Just through rules, or are you doing that through...
They built it for us.
Okay, that makes sense. So my initial thought maybe rules, something like that would work, but I don't know how you would pass in that unique string or set of strings that you would want each of those files to be tagged with on save or on publish if it's an edit node. So I don't know. Anything else? Yes?
Did you have to do any hooks or any custom coding for
No,
this, or straight up module?
Let me preface this by saying I am an awful coder. I did computer science in college, and I was not the best student. Everything that takes 1 hour for a good coder to do takes me about 5 to 6. So given that, I did not want to touch it at all. So this entire website uses 0 custom code, which is my favorite part, because I don't want to maintain that code because I am awful at it. And I'd much rather leave it to the guys and gals that know how to do it and can do it all the time, all day, every day. I'd much rather play with this because I'm comfortable with this and I can work with this. So yes, that's another great thing about this, is there's no custom code used here except for what the beautiful community has already given, which I'm very thankful and indebted to all of them for what they do. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for attending, guys. Yeah.